Growth Pod is brought to you by Genero, a leading growth agency in the Nordics. We interview marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories and strategies behind profitable growth.
Today I'm joined by Lars Silberbauer, the CMO of HMD Global. HMD is a company that currently manufactures and sells Nokia smartphones around the world. Lars previously held key marketing positions at the International Olympic Committee, Viacom, and Lego. Welcome to the show, Lars.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You joined HMD last year from the International Olympic Committee, and I'd be interested to know kind of like what was your thought process? First of all, what attracted you to joining HMD, and what was your thought process in going in to kind of take the marketing lead on what used to be a top 5 global brand like Nokia? Like everyone used to be the most valuable company in Europe, incredibly successful, huge legacy. So what was your kind of like thinking? What attracted you to the position, and how were you thinking about like the role that you were stepping into?
It's a really good question, because of course you have a lot of considerations when taking new positions and when making a big move, especially when that involves a relocation as well. So it's not to go into my full life story, but I was a few years in New York working for Viacom, which is now rebranded to Paramount. I was senior vice president over there during the pandemic. Then I was 2 years at the Olympic IOC, and we did the Tokyo Summer Olympics and the Beijing Winter Olympics. And like with all respect to the IOC, it's a quite political place. It's a quite slow-moving organization. And even though the Olympics are fantastic and like some people are running very fast, the movement as such is quite political. So I had my learnings there and wanted to move into a startup, which HMD is really a startup. I had a mentor like way back many years ago who said like that would be my obvious next step into startup. That should be like a medium-sized startup, and that's what I saw when I was approached by HMD. It was a completely new industry for me. Like I haven't worked in mobile tech before. And but I've been through Lego, like toy industry, been to entertainment, been to sports marketing, and for me there was a quite interesting challenge to take on a completely new industry, and with a startup that's been, and the last year has been incredibly fast moving, and it's been absolutely exciting.
Did you already have, like when you were first approached and when you first got started, did you immediately have kind of like, oh, this is the direction that I want to help take the brand. These are the initiatives that I want to work on. These are the strategies that I'm going to start implementing. Or how did you get to formulate kind of what you're going to be doing, your priorities as you were stepping into, like you said, a completely new industry, and in a very fast moving company?
Well, I try to, because I've done this quite a few times now. It's like I joined Lego to help build up the digital presence. I moved to MTV at Viacom to really change their production model and the way that they perceive the MTV digital business from a TV-centered way of thinking, a mindset, into a digital mindset. And then again with the Olympics, where we made some massive progress on the way that the brand was thought of, the way they was communicating, and the way I have I wouldn't say a method, but it's definitely a structured approach to those challenges. And it's first and foremost, you can't understand the brand DNA before you get into the business. And you can have all kinds of dreams and hopes and wishes and plans, but before you get your feet inside the company and start working with the stakeholders, start understanding the history, the core of the brand DNA, I think it would be very risky to make too many conclusions before you actually get to understand it. So what I do typically is I'm often getting hired to do a transformation and do a change in the company. And for me to change a company, you first need to stop everything that is not helpful or that is not needed. Really to carve out time and space and resources with everyone in the company, so they can actually take on a challenge that is change. Because if you don't do that, then you just put another layer on top of what people are already working on, already busy with, and then they're actually like they're not in a good place, and they can't really facilitate. They can't really like get into that change that need to happen. So you need to stop a lot of things, and sometimes you also need to, unfortunately, make some people redundant. But you need to have that room before you can actually start building change and start helping facilitate change in the company.
Got it. I thought that was an interesting point that you mentioned, that you can't really understand it from the outside. You have to get inside to do it. At the same time, some of the company experiences you've had, Lego, the Olympics, MTV, I mean, these are global companies, really very heavily ingrained with culture and content. And so as you know, you probably had some ideas like, how did you see Nokia, the Nokia brand, fitting into the overall culture, which in my mind has been dominated by Apple. And Apple has turned the phone from something that's very much focused on utility to also now being an accessory. Of course, there's a whole other segments with feature phones and so forth. But how did you think about like the role of culture and content, and how Nokia fits in with what's happening and how people are thinking about phones?
I think the power of Nokia is very different. The brand power is very different from different regions, and depending on which regions you're in, where it doesn't hold a lot of brand power outside the feature phone space in Europe, where in other parts of the world like India, MENA, Africa, like South Africa is a really strong market for us. There is still like a lot of affinity around the Nokia brand. So it's been a very different approach if you compare to Lego. Like Lego is a one brand company. Our approach to the Nokia brand has been, or my approach has been, that we need to really perceive it and treat it differently from the different regions depending on where we're in. And what we've done this year is also to go into basically saying like HMD is not just producing Nokia phones, but we are a multi-brand company. So we will be producing different phones, and we'll also be launching HMD phones, and HMD stands for human mobile devices. So that will be a completely different audience and a completely different target group, where Nokia is a brand that of course has like more resonance with the older demographics than the younger. And then what we've then been able to do is to feed on this whole trend about what I call nostalgia or nostalgia, where people are picking up from like the Y2K trend, picking up things from the late 90s, early 2000s, and take the best parts of what they perceive was a happier time, and then bringing that into a 2023 or 2024 context. And has been very successful for us, with bringing back the 2660 flip phone and like some of the other really iconic original models from the best of the Nokia era. And so we've been able to play both on developing new devices in some markets, really feeding on the brand affinity, and then using it as a retro brand in other markets.
Yeah, totally. I was so happy. I was looking at the Nokia website for the different products you had, and I scrolled down, and the very first one for the feature phones was the 3310. That was my first phone, and so that was really. Do
you still have it?
No, I don't. But actually, I did. We're gonna probably talk about that as well. The dumbphone trends and having a
sure.
non-smartphone as well. I did a couple of years ago. I bought a Nokia. I can't forget the model, because I don't want to have the smartphone always on me and be distracted by it. But can you talk a little bit about feature phones? Because I feel like, at least for me, I mean, when I think phones, I think smartphones, and that's from a Western perspective. But can you talk a little bit about like first of all, what's the difference between feature and smartphone? Why are feature phones still so relevant? And how is Nokia positioned there? You guys are the market leader in that category. Am I correct?
Yeah, like we are the leader in value globally on feature phones. So feature phones, or dumb phones, if you wish, is a traditional like block phone that we've had when we all grew up. The one that could last like a week or 2 weeks on one battery charge, and you would never go into a bar and have to ask for a charger, because of course it would be better on the phone until the next morning or until the next week. So that's a typical one. Of course, it's limited with the amount of functionality it has, but as you also said, like that's actually sometimes a smart choice when you pick a dumb phone, because it does actually keep you more focused on what you want. And then of course, smartphones is we all know a smartphone, and how a smartphone, and also how they're developing across different different brands that are out there, and I'm sure that we all have a smartphone and quite certain need a smartphone. But the question is sometimes, do we also want to supplement it with a feature phone to understand what sometimes is dragging us into digital, it's the whole world of digital, and not really with a lot of benefits as we want to.
Just from a branding perspective, because you mentioned that Lego, obviously it's a one brand, global brand. The Olympic Committee, that's one brand as well. But with Nokia, you've got different markets, you've got these different segments. And, I think it would make sense to me just if you said, okay, we're gonna be the leader in these let's say especially developing markets with feature phones. And then there's also maybe a trend towards dumb phones in the more developed markets. We're gonna take that segment as well. But Nokia is you have a huge portfolio of 50 products, over 50 products, across both feature and smartphones. Do you find that difficult from a brand perspective, from the CMO's perspective of like, we have all these different products, we've got these different ends of the market that we're trying to go after. And we've got, how do you think about like this complexity? Does it make sense? Is it, how do you try to balance that coming from a background of like having single brands so you can push it around the world?
I think is a single brand or one brand companies, they have their strength and weaknesses as well, because you can't adapt that brand approach to individual markets. Like Lego, they very, very rarely want to do products for just one market. They want to do that fire station, Lego fire station, that needs to be sold in all markets. You can't have your own fire station, which then again gives you a hyper efficient company with great margins if you can pull it off. And so the other part of the question is like how to think about it in Nokia. In the case of Nokia, I think that's where we have had to split it up and say like, no, we will need to launch a new brand or several new brands that I can't disclose more of that, but several brands will appear next year to really be able to have young, youthful, really edgy brands that you can say many things about the retro trend, but it doesn't bring you that edginess that a new brand might have. And then we have the Nokia brand to solve other challenges, and then we might have other brands as well. So I think that's if you look at more like a house of brands, which we're approaching or we are already. That's different way of attacking different demographics. And in this market where we have big players like Samsung and Apple and so on, with the nimbleness that we have and agility, that's our best bet to fight that competition.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. That you're not going to be able to outspend Apple on brand marketing.
No, without disclosing budgets, I could say that's not the case. Yeah, that's not the case.
Exactly. So like then, I mean that approach seems to make a lot of sense. Can you talk a little bit about the agility that you mentioned and how you've turned that into a competitive advantage? And I'd love to hear like if you can disclose any practical examples of how you've been able to leap on new opportunities or do things that maybe the bigger competitors haven't. I listened to other podcasts where you mentioned AI. You felt that that's something that you've been able to start implementing faster than some of your, maybe the industry at large. So could you talk a little bit about like that agility and how that plays out in practice?
Sure. It's I would say in the last year we've become a smaller company. We've streamlined the company, which also made it a lot more efficient and creating more, at the same time creating more impact. And we've done that by removing a couple of leadership layers, and especially in marketing, basically removed a whole layer, which have taken away a ton of meetings, a ton of alignment. I think to do that, you need to build in a lot of trust in the direction and make sure that people, they trust that they don't need to be in that meeting because someone else got them. Like they will do their job. You don't need to be there. You need to be listened to. You do yours, I do mine, and then we just continue as fast as possible. So we've been able to really optimize it on a structures, and I've been actually quite impressed about the whole company, how we've really have turned around a culture that I wouldn't say it wasn't efficient before, but definitely we've injected rocket fuel into the veins of the organization. On the specific marketing and that part of technology, we've been able to, like, right from the get-go, when AI became a commodity at a level where it was easy approachable, like ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, whatever you have, Bard. We've been putting that into the marketing operation extremely fast. Like, it's ChatGPT was very quickly part of the daily operation, and I would also say, for instance, like with ideation, when it comes to creativity, sitting there in a meeting and being able to do prompts up against Midjourney and getting ideas back, it just really accelerates your creative development. It really amplifies it, and then you can take it into 3D productions or whatever you want to have, the finalized studio production, to make sure that you control all the different nuances. But I think this whole Kintor principle about being half man, half machine, I think the creative teams and marketing teams that the first and the quickest are able to adopt and control AI will definitely have a huge advantage. But on top of that, that also means that you need to be even more aware of your cultural references, your questions you're asking the AI. It needs to be at a level where you can actually control it and actually know what you're controlling it. Because AI can do many things, but it can't really predict yet culture and how a piece of advertising will be perceived in a future environment. And that's where you still have people like me and my team who needs to be able to control that and to actually to select the different outputs from the AI. But I think a lot of bigger companies will not be able to adopt that like overnight as we've been able to, and that's of course our advantage. Then the others, they have the big budgets, but we feel comfortable that we can actually take them on. We don't need to take 50% of the market. We can just a few percent every year. That would be good enough for us.
Have you already seen kind of like along any of the quantitative metrics improvements from using AI? Like, it used to take us this long to get a creative out, and now we can do it in half the time or something along those lines.
Yeah. It's not even like we don't need to measure it, because it's a completely different world. It's just very different, and it takes fewer people, but those people that you have needs to be very skilled and very knowledgeable, and they need to know, because it goes so fast. You need to make sure that you have a Formula One driver behind the wheels, and not someone who's been dragged behind a horse. So I can put it in that way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I feel like one of the biggest kind of like maybe most of the friction when it comes to adopting AI comes from people being threatened by it, feeling threatened by it. And obviously, if you don't adapt, it is a threat. So how have you been able to get the team on board? Because I feel like that's something that companies will struggle with. Is like the tools are out there, and they're not that. I mean, the interface for using, whether it's Midjourney or ChatGPT, it's very simple. It's never been this simple to use these powerful tools. So companies and people and teams should be able to adopt them. I feel like adoption is still fairly low if you look just across the board. And I feel like one big reason is that people are a bit threatened by it. They don't want to engage with it. They don't really want. People are generally, they may be reluctant to change. So how have you been able to get the team on board, where it sounds like you've radically changed how you work in a lot of ways?
Yeah, no, and I think that is actually what it takes. It takes leadership. It takes the leaders to get their hands dirty. And if the leaders are not sitting there like fiddling around with their own Discord server and knowing how to use Midjourney and studying the fast development in prompts and so on, if the leaders are not doing it, then no one will do it. Or like it might be a few, but it's not really going to change anything. But the moment that the leaders are sitting there and then they know actually more about it than a lot of the employees, then I think they realize that like it's time to get going. Like this will. Am I going to get on this train or am I not? Because there's not going to be a lot of people left at the station when that train is moving. So I think that's what it takes, and it takes of course also someone to say like it's okay. There are risks using new technology. We are willing to take those risks, because the risks of not doing it are even bigger. And again, as an underdog and as a a small competitor who's getting in there, like we need to take all the chances we can get to move fast and to get ahead. That's the only that's the only change we actually have. So we cannot sit there and rely on a McKinsey report that's going to come next year, because then everyone has adopted it, everyone will know about it. So we need to carve our own path, and the good thing about that is that you actually learn so much by getting your hands dirty and really trial and error, and then just like move like Mark Zuckerberg fast in the way that you execute.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and like you said, I mean that when you don't have any other choice, you have to be nimble, you have to be fast. One thing that I'd love to hear more kind of you talk about is the understanding culture, because I feel like when it comes to consumer brands, one of the really, really difficult things, especially if you're trying to do a national creative, have a national brand or global brand even, or especially a global brand, is keeping your finger on the pulse of the culture and understanding where it's headed and understanding where it resonates. And you've been doing that, like Lego, Olympics, MTV. You need to understand culture really well. So without like going into, these are specific sources that we go to, these are the specific, this is how we go about it. I'd love to hear like, what's your general framework for it comes to understanding culture? Is it speaking to a lot of different people, getting a lot of qualitative and quantitative input? Or is it like just purely quantitative? Like, how do you go about and thinking about what will resonate? Where is culture going? And how are we going to then adjust our creative or messaging to fit that?
I think first and foremost, I enjoy traveling, and if you work in a global position, I'm not saying you have to love airports, but you need to accept spending a lot of time in airports, and that's one thing, because you need to get out there and you can read as many reports you want about a certain market or a certain culture, what you might want to call it. But until you breathe the air that's in that region or in that city, and meet people and talk to lots of people in that specific place, you can't get it. At least I can't get my head around it. I can't feel it. But then suddenly the reports you then read are giving you the quantitative, and then you understand why things are the way they are, and you have this kind of like you get both. You get to feel it, you get to sense it, and you get to get your rational brain around it. So that's typically how I do it. And before you stand in a mobile store somewhere in Delhi, you don't really know what issues they have. But you need to, of course, apply that and scale that, so you don't just act on anecdotes and what happened to be the case in that single shop you were in. But you need to make sure that that's actually is validated by data. I think we've worked a lot with implementing a lot more consumer data and a more consumer-centric way of thinking. That's also why, besides being CMO, I'm also head of product design. So we make sure that we have that kind of like a CXO experience officer in one position, which I think is quite important when you're working with something like tech or even toys, I would say. So that's how I get it. I think we've by introducing a lot of more insights, a lot more consumer centricity, we have this, I think, great conversations between markets giving the on the streets input to whatever data our insights team might be bringing them, so we can have a conversation and we can all try to understand it from each our point of view, which is definitely needed before you can craft your messaging.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That kind of structure seems to make a lot of sense. Though I could imagine it being quite overwhelming, given that there are so many markets and segments, and they're probably very, very different in how they perceive Nokia, in how or any future brand that you're launching, and also like what they want in general from a phone.
Yeah, like it's of course there's never just one opinion about things, but I think that's the good thing. But also working as a startup. And I think that's actually one of the benefits compared to bigger companies, where a company like Lego, they sometimes do the paralysis by analysis, and they do spend a lot of time on trying to what they perceive as minimizing risks, but actually they're building up a lot of risk in a specific project, because they're investing so much in research, where things could have been tried out 5 times, compared to the time it takes to do those reports. As a small company, we don't have that luxury of inviting all of the big consultancies indoor and hearing their point of view. We have to execute quite quickly. So we might not know 100% of what's out there, but sometimes we believe that 75% of knowing exactly like it must be in this direction we need to move, and then to get going, that tends to be a fast approach and a better approach for us.
Do you think that kind of approach to, let's say, it's not, all decisions are not made by committees. Every decision does not have to have 3 consult agencies or consultancies give their opinion on it. Like that ability, willingness to take on risk and to be directionally correct and quick, as opposed to be perfectly correct and slow. Do you think that is obviously has to do with the company culture and things like you mentioned in a previous episode or another podcast that you did, the importance of the relationship between the CMO and CFO, like that alignment is really important. But do you think that's something that startups can do? And when you get to a big enough company, you will get that slowness, you will get that paralysis by analysis. Is that just inevitable, or have you seen that actually in any big company being able to do that?
I hope it's not inevitable, and I think some companies, the hyper-efficient companies, they don't get into that trap or fall into that trap. But it is often like when you have years of success, then you become more focused on not destroying that success instead of creating it and creating new successes. So that's typically how it goes, and I that's a natural thing. And also, why shouldn't you stick to what has made you successful before? Like, it would be a shame not to do it, right? But then you need to really question yourself sometimes, and that's where you need to have output, like or an incoming amount of new people who's allowed to think differently and allowed to try things out differently and question the existing. And that balance, of course, extremely hard to find. And that is what's going to make or break companies in the long run.
Totally. I think it's commendable that you've been able to apply that kind of approach to what, like I said, used to be one of the biggest brands in the world. And you could easily kind of like have that feeling of like, oh, we have to be very, very careful before we go ahead and try anything new. This very well-known, respected brand.
Yeah, I'm also very fortunate to have like an executive leadership, be part of the executive leadership, and also having a CEO and chairman of the board that is very decisive and know that we need to move fast to still be part of this industry.
Totally. I want to talk about sustainability, because from what I've been reading, it sounds like you've really taken a different approach. Everyone talks about sustainability. Well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of companies do. But it sounds like at Nokia, you've actually made some real, not just greenwashing, but actually changes in, or your business model aligns with a real focus, emphasis on sustainability. So can you talk about your approach and maybe how it's different from the overall industry?
Yeah, sure. So again, like I will work for HMD, who does Nokia phones. So Nokia is still another company who does B2B. But at HMD, and I think we've also been, in the last year, we've been much more specific in what our contribution is and what our opinion is on sustainability. We are, for the second year in a row, platinum rated on EcoVadis. So that's the highest rating you can get on EcoVadis, which means quite a lot on not just sustainability, but how you both are an ethical company, how you have your work culture and everything. They do really a great job in measuring all these things. And we're proud to be the only company that's done that twice in a row to be platinum rated. But also the way that we see it, and again, like defining human mobile devices, that means that we need to create a positive impact on the planet, but we also wanted to create it in a way where we make profit, because if you don't make profits, you are not scalable. And I personally don't believe in sustainability by being a charity, because you can't scale charity. Like that's just going to be like just more money on the table every single market, every single advancement that you do. You need to create business models that are truly sustainable, both from a profitability point of view, but also from an eco point of view. And that's what we are doing, and that's I think that's working quite well. But it also makes me feel good that we don't just stand up there on a stage and saying like we're sustainable, but actually we are. The more products we sell, the more we grow, the more sustainable we will be, and the more sustainability will impact the world in a good way. So I think that's a great mission, and that's also a good reason why I'm in the company.
And the smartphone industry as a whole is kind of like, at least the hardware side of it is predicated on this push to update. I don't know what the average is, but maybe something like once a year. And I think some billions of phones are lying unused, and these are phones that contain a lot of minerals and other elements that have been really expensive for the environment. These phones are very expensive to build, and they're just being cycled through very quickly, and there's not much recycling happening. So how it sounds like HMD, with the focus on feature phones and maybe also with some of your smartphones, there's a real focus on products that will last for a long time, and not trying to, let's say, I don't even know if some manufacturers do this, but degrading battery life quite quickly to get an upgrade, to push for upgrades or updates. It sounds like you guys are really focused on creating products that will last for and not force or nudge people into continuously updating their hardware.
Yeah, like I normally use the analogy of a washing machine. Like imagine like you bought a Siemens washing machine, and 6 months later, it keeps part of the clothes you put into it, and it starts tumbling slower and slower and slower. And after 12 months after you bought it, you have to buy a new one. It's going to be a small upgrade, but it's going to cost you $2,000. And no one would accept that. But for some reason, consumers have been educated to accept that when it comes to mobile phones. So the upgrade cycle it's also because we have some very big players that can only increase the amount of revenue they have if they continue to push the upgrade cycle, right? So they have so much market share already that it's difficult for them to actually grow in other ways. And that has created this kind of upgrade virus where you need to have a new phone every single year. And that's not what we believe in. Like we want people to keep their phones in hands for a longer time. That's why we are, and I'm proud to say as well, we're the leaders when it comes to repairability and how to repair your phone. And then when I say that, people often saying like, okay, so I can take it to the shop and they're going to repair it quicker. It's like, no, you can do it yourself. Like you can actually repair some of our phones that we launched this year. You can repair it if you have a guitar collector, if you have a screwdriver. You can replace the battery, you can replace the screen, or you can replace the charging sockets on your phone. And those three elements alone, they account for 85% of things that break in phones. So by doing that, and then we're going to innovate that, we're going to come out with some really cool stuff next year on that like repairability angle, which is going to make it even easier. And that's for us a way just to say like we are different. No, we actually do want you to keep your phone in hand for longer. And then of course being asked, but are you then going to sell less phones? It's like, no, it's going pretty great, because we want of course to grow our market share and also not to disclose any big numbers, but we have room to grow. Like we are not Samsung and Apple yet. There's still a lot of market out there for us to conquer.
Got it. You're taking all these steps that will reduce the likelihood that someone repurchase within a reasonable, like the repurchase rate will be lower because you're focused on growing overall market share. That's something that your investors are willing to support, and you see it as a way to truly differentiate yourselves.
Yeah, and then we can, and also I think it's the right thing to do. So it's not just a gimmick to differentiate ourselves. It's actually the right thing to do. And I think also there's a movement and a trend in the world right now. You see the right to repair movement. You see, like, of course, like everyone can see with their open eyes, like own eyes, that they can see that the planet is struggling. So we can't just pretend that we can continue this one. And then we believe that we don't know, we can't solve like the climate crisis or anything, but at least within tech we can be part of the solution, and we hope to be part of the solution, and hope to innovate and come up with part of the solutions to these massive issues, like 5.4 billion mobile devices are lying around in drawers worldwide. Like that's a lot of raw materials that have gone into those, and we can't just continue have another like 5 million in a couple of years being put next to the others in the drawer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Another thing that you've done that's very different from the rest of the industry is you are the first and the only smartphone corporation, or maybe at least one of the major ones, that have production now in manufacturing operations in Europe, Hungary specifically. I'm guessing not all your phones are made there in Hungary, but some are. So can you talk a little bit about that? Is this something that you're seeing coming from consumers? Because I know that, for instance, in Germany, I mean, they're one of the biggest markets, or the biggest markets in biggest market in Europe. They're quite mindful of their privacy, and some companies, I think it was Aldi, who started like their AWS competitor, with one of the big selling arguments was the data is stored, everything is done in Europe, and that was their kind of main argument. So are you seeing that from consumers as well? This geopolitical concerns, maybe, or privacy concerns? Yeah. How are you thinking about this whole piece?
Absolutely. And again, it's we believe it's the right thing to do, not just to have manufacturing in Europe, but to have manufacturing close to where your phones are being bought and used. So we have manufacturing in India as well. We have manufacturing in Kenya. We have manufacturing in I think it's Vietnam and other places as well. So it's not just that we have it in Europe, but of course we are a European company. We are based in we're registered in Finland. I'm based in London myself, where we have the marketing team and design team. We have our data in a data center in Finland, like they're in Europe. So for us, it didn't start with consumers. We could see that it was consumer interest, but like there was no other mobile manufacturer that are even close to daring to open production or manufacturing in Europe. But we believed, because we had some really strong request from security industries, that Europe manufacturing would be seen very, very positively. And then the interesting thing is, like, after we open the manufacturing and we actually can see that the products are hitting the market for consumers as well, we can see that people are actually willing, and no one was even close to guessing that this would happen, but the people are actually willing to pay a certain price, an amount more for European made products if you live in Europe.
That must be so cool just from the marketing perspective, because some of the things we talked about, some of the initiatives, it just gives you so much like raw material to work with and start thinking about how we can market and position these things. So I think that I imagine that would be really kind of like a red meat for the marketing team to be like, yes, now we can, there's so much you can do with that. And a company that does things so differently than the rest of the industry.
Yeah, but it's also marketing one-on-one, right? Like if you can't go into a competition on being like the lowest on price and highest on specs, then you need to come with something different, right? And I think that's what we have done, and we are a European company, and that comes with some benefits and some disadvantages. But one of them is definitely that we can do things like this, and also have this. And honestly have a sustainability angle and repairability story that is very authentic. It's fully thought through, and we're spending a lot of time on it. And it's of course a challenge for our engineers to get to the same thinness of the device when we want to have repairability in it. So it's not something that's easy to do. It's bloody hard to do, and I can see how many iterations they need to do to get it done, and to get it done right, because we also believe, and I believe, that to have a product that is sustainable and scalable and profitable, it needs to be all of those things, but it also needs to look cool. You want a device that looks fabulous, and when you put those demands on a device that needs to be repairable, it needs to be beautiful, and it also needs to be affordable, which our phones really, really are. Then that's a challenge for the engineers. But luckily we have some great guys in the product team, and they continue to just come through for us every single time we put another crazy demand on them.
It really sounds like you have taken this kind of consumer first approach to the product roadmap and product strategy in general, which I guess the opposite of that was the downfall of the original Nokia smartphone. At least from the outside, that was the criticism, that they were too engineering driven and not enough. Steve Jobs came along. He knew design. He knew what customers wanted. The rest is kind of history. But it sounds like that is really driving the decisions you're making is kind of the market and the culture.
Yeah, I don't know what happened back in the days with Nokia. I was not part of the industry at that point. I was probably at Lego in those days. So can't comment on that one. I just think that we have a great opportunity right now with HMD going into multi-brand, going into developed tech in a different way. I also don't know why $2,000 is believed to be a price point for a phone. I think like we can make phones down to like $300-400. That are great phones. They look great. They have a great user experience. So it's also, we need to think differently. We also need to educate the consumers to think differently in a way like well, why would you spend that much if you can get something that is actually really, really good at a lower price point?
Totally. We have a couple of to just ask a little bit about kind of like the profitability and performance and measurement piece, because that's always something I find really, really interesting. So just if you could give quickly kind of, I heard you in a previous podcast talk about how you were trying to measure the quantitative effects of brand marketing at Lego and the process of how you went about like having different video creatives and how you measured that. So if you could just briefly kind of talk about that, I think that's always just really interesting to see companies, very successful companies, and how they're able to different approaches to measurability of something that inherently is very difficult to measure.
Yeah, and I can just start. You mentioned previously about the importance of a good relationship between the CMO and the CFO, and I think that starts with you being able to show the CFO how his money is being spent and what it's bringing back. And I think that is some marketeers. I've seen a few examples are coming in with great campaigns and great ideas, and they blow a lot of money on brand awareness assets, but without showing the return on investment. And I think that is a great way to destroy your relationship with the CFO. So what I always prioritize, not because I think that's when you as an organization, as a marketing organization, as a marketing team, you start to learn. That is when you know the numbers and you obsess about the numbers. And for instance, at Lego, I think that's the example you're referring to. We were measuring YouTube content and the development of YouTube content. Typically, you would just like post the content and then you look at like, did we get some subscribers? Did we get some unfollowers, or what happened here? But instead of doing that, we basically took the content, did the best thing we could do creatively, we thought, and then we took put it up with paid media to the specific demographic that we wanted to reach, and let it sit there with paid media for 72 hours. Then we pulled it down again. And then we looked at the retention rates. So basically, how long has people been watching the content? So how sticky is the content? That's super important. If it's not sticky, people not watch your content. They watch the first 7 seconds. That's it. They're gone. So you need to watch the retention. Then you need to watch the brand uplift. So basically, we did brand uplift studies or brand lift studies on these pieces of content to see, did that stickiness actually, did the content and the content of view, did they actually translate into that specific brand, into the Lego brand. And then afterwards, we did a search uplift study to see, did people's behavior actually change post content or post they've seen this content? Because that is when really, if they start searching on Lego, even like Lego sets, like then you know like that is hyper efficient. So we did that for 72 hours, and then we re-edited basically brutally based on those numbers. Then we put it up again with paid media, not on the channel, but with paid media to the same demographics, of course, different people, took it down again, look at the same numbers, and then re-edit it once more. And we've done it up to 5 times, but we can see like after 3 times you've done this method, it doesn't really increase the amount of, or the impact of the content. But we could easily see from the first edit to the third edit, easily see uplifts of 40% in some of these like the differences between the first and the third edit. And then, you know, like when you then put money behind it and really go big, then you have content that is performing and outperforming anything you've done before. And you also get the learnings and you understand like which talent works, how does our editing work, how does everything combine. And then you have this positive relationship between creativity and the creatives and the data that they need to really investigate and learn from. And I think that's again like that's where creatives in a company also need to lean into a lot of science, a lot of data to really understand what is working with a specific audience and what's not.
I love that. I mean, it's so practical. It's you find that kind of proxy that will correlate with actual value creation sales in the future. And because it's in a 72-hour window, you keep it 72 hours of running, and then however long the period after measurement is. It's a very tight window, so that gives you that very short, tight feedback loop, and you can just run that like multiple times per month, presumably, if you have the resources and the processes in place, and get so much like you're saying 3 to 5 iterations, you're seeing 40% uplifts.
Yeah,
like. That's huge if you can run those iterations very quickly and efficiently.
Exactly, and you get closer to the data, you get closer to the consumers, and again, like when you go back to the CFO with data like that, I said like this is how we spend your money. Then if you can see the return on investment, there's more money where they're coming from. So that's also the positive relationship that you need to build through data with the CFO.
Totally, Lars. I know you did a good. So just one very quick final question for me. What is one Nokia phone that you think people should go check out? People in our audience. Is there anything that stands out?
I think you should check out all of them and buy all of them. No, you should only buy the ones you actually can use. I would say the G42 Pink is a great phone, and it's repairable. It's a very low price point on the phone, and it's got really, really good remarks. We also won the Time Magazine award for best innovation in the repairability category this year, and that's down to the G42. I would also recommend the 2660 Flip if you want to take a digital detox and get back to the late 90s, or no, that's actually like early 2000s. I would say the joy of having a conversation with someone, and if you get a tiny bit angry with them, you can just like flip it and close it, and then just like put it on tape. It sends you back. It's really a great phone, and you will not need that charger very often. That's for sure.
I love that. Lars, thank you so much. I know you guys have planned a lot of things for next year, so there's a lot of things in the pipeline. I'm going to be very excited to follow that. Partially because as a Finn, it's very exciting to see how the Nokia brand is faring. And of course, you got the HMD phones coming out. So that will be really exciting to see as well. So Lars, thank you so much for taking time. It was a pleasure to have you on and to learn from you. Wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. You can find all episodes of The Growth Pod on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.